The coalition's outpost stood like a scar on the edge of enemy territory, marred and half-consumed by relentless waves of assault. Scattered fires flickered in the desolate landscape, casting eerie shadows over trenches filled with exhausted soldiers from a dozen alien species, all huddling against the chill of encroaching defeat. The ground, torn and stained by countless blasts, held the remnants of shattered defense turrets and broken walls, while craters marked places where hope had been obliterated alongside munitions and comrades. Furtive glances passed between coalition soldiers as they clutched their weapons tighter, their faces etched with weariness and the resignation of a drawn-out war. For months, they had held this line barely. Now, every passing hour chipped away at their morale, leaving them hollowed out and fatigued. Only desperate determination kept them in formation, a tenacity forced by the knowledge that retreat would mean not only personal death, but the possible downfall of entire civilizations. As the latest bombardment ceased, they raised their eyes, scanning for the next wave of enemies that would emerge from the smoky horizon. A reptilian soldier from the Raxalan species, with scales that once shimmered with pride, now dulled from the constant blasts of enemy fire, growled in frustration. His clawed hand tightened around his rifle as he peered into the gloom. "The Arisian armies are endless," he muttered, shaking his head. "How much longer can we hold?" A quiet murmur of agreement passed through the ranks. The Arisian forces, the enemy that had surged across sector after sector, were tireless, almost mechanical in their efficiency and brutality. They moved with cold precision, exploiting every weakness the coalition left open. Each wave battered the Allied forces, revealing fractures in their lines that couldn't be mended fast enough. The coalition's commander's new morale was fracturing. As he gazed across the battlefield, Commander Lathe, a member of the Serpentine Zerati species, coiled anxiously. His slender form shivered slightly, betraying the weight of the decision he'd made just a few days prior, one that could either save them or doom them. An encrypted message had arrived from a distant ally, Earth. Though humanity was relatively new to interstellar politics, they had offered assistance in this desperate hour. He had accepted, even if his own soldiers had whispered doubts. Humans were unpredictable, some said, and others added they were ruthless. Lathe hoped that humanity's famed ferocity in battle might tip the scales. Around the base, soldiers of various species huddled in tense silence, talking in hushed voices, their eyes flickering with a strange mix of curiosity and dread. They had heard tales of humans, stories about their relentless adaptability, about their willingness to fight even when the odds were impossibly stacked against them. Some of these tales were whispered as legends, others were more fearful, foreboding warnings. "Humans don't retreat," a gruff Targun soldier muttered, his bristling fur flattening as he glanced over his shoulder. "They either win or burn the whole place down with themselves in it." Another alien, a broad-shouldered Farnax, with a row of quills lining his back, nodded solemnly. "They call them Ruthless," he murmured. "Said they'll do anything, that they don't think twice about collateral damage if it means winning." The soldiers fell silent, casting glances back at the command tent where Commander Lathe was pacing. The tales only added to the tension. These were not the disciplined, cold-minded soldiers of other species. They were something else entirely. Some aliens felt a thrill at the idea of being backed by such formidable allies. Others felt an uneasy chill at the thought of inviting such unpredictable warriors into their ranks. Before Lathe could respond to any of the worried mutterings from his subordinates, an alarm blared through the comm system. The commander's voice cut through the noise, his voice trembling with urgency. "All soldiers, take your positions. Another Arisian wave is incoming from the east perimeter." The coalition forces scrambled, exhaustion momentarily overridden by the adrenaline-fueled survival instinct. Troops clambered into position along crumbling barricades, weapons aimed, eyes narrowed against the darkness, where their adversaries lurked. Through the dense smoke and rubble, faint shapes emerged steely, disciplined lines of Arisian soldiers. These warriors moved in unison, almost as if controlled by a single mind, a machine of flesh and fury with one purpose: obliterate. Explosions erupted across the battlefield as the two sides clashed, the air thickening with the acrid scent of plasma discharge and the sickly sweet stench of burning flesh. Coalition forces fought valiantly, each species drawing upon its unique capabilities in the hopes of gaining an edge. The Raxilans slashed through enemy lines with their razor-sharp claws. The Farnax unleashed quills that pierced Arisian armor. Even the Zerati wielded their agility to evade and strike. But it was not enough. The Arisian forces surged forward with relentless aggression, and for every enemy soldier that fell, another took its place. The coalition's carefully laid defenses began to buckle under the weight of the onslaught, and soldiers found themselves pushed back, step by agonizing step. Cries of pain echoed through the outpost, and an unsettling realization dawned upon them all. They were losing ground fast. Commander Lathe watched in grim silence, clenching his fists. His eyes were trained on the endless waves of Arisian soldiers flooding forward, tearing through his forces with clinical efficiency. Desperation gnawed at him. He had one card left to play: the humans. But where were they? He scanned the horizon, praying to see some sign of their arrival. Just as hope began to wane, a voice crackled through Lathe's communicator. "Commander, unidentified ship approaching from the west. Scans indicate it's human." Relief surged through him, though it was tinged with a peculiar fear. He motioned for his soldiers to hold their ground, to push just a little longer. "They're here," he murmured to himself, barely loud enough for anyone else to hear. The human craft descended over the outpost with a startling abruptness, almost as if the pilots reveled in dramatic entrances. Dark, angular, and clearly armored for combat, the craft landed with a precision that seemed almost surgical, its presence casting a foreboding shadow over the coalition soldiers who now gaped at it in mixed awe and apprehension. The craft's doors slid open, and the human soldiers stepped out. They wore armor unlike any other species, compact, dark, and clearly reinforced for battle. Their faces were obscured by visors that gleamed with a sinister hue under the dimming light. Their movements were efficient, every step calculated, every gesture imbued with a sense of deadly purpose. At their head was a figure who stood taller than most, his posture relaxed, but radiating a silent intensity that even the alien commander could feel from a distance. Lathe approached, feeling a chill crawl up his spine as he met the human commander's gaze, his visor still lowered. "You're the reinforcements from Earth?" Lathe asked, his voice betraying a flicker of doubt. The human commander tilted his head, his tone flat and without any hint of emotion. "We're here to get the job done. What's the current status?" The alien soldiers shifted uneasily as they watched the humans deploy with methodical precision, each of them falling into formation without a word spoken. They moved as if bound by an unspoken code, a silent understanding that their purpose was singular: win at any cost. Lathe gestured toward the eastern front, where the coalition's forces were visibly weakening. "The Arisian waves keep coming. We're barely holding. We need reinforcements." "You needed reinforcements days ago," the human commander interrupted, scanning the battlefield with an appraising eye. "We'll be the last line of defense. You just keep your forces clear of our line of fire." The commander's words were cold and direct, a tone the coalition soldiers weren't accustomed to, but they obeyed without question. The humans took up positions, setting up heavy artillery and fortifications in record time. They moved with the efficiency of a predator closing in on its prey, their demeanor calm, almost unsettlingly so, as if they had seen far worse than this broken battlefield. As the next wave of Arisian soldiers emerged from the shadows, the human forces unleashed a brutal onslaught. Their weapons were precise, designed for maximum damage, and fired with an unerring accuracy that seemed to border on instinct. The alien soldiers watched in awe and a touch of horror as the humans mowed down the Arisian front lines without a flicker of hesitation. The humans' tactics were different, almost ruthless. They exploited every weakness, showing no mercy, no hesitation. The Arisian forces faltered, a ripple of confusion passing through their ranks as they encountered an opponent unlike any they had faced before. The coalition soldiers found themselves invigorated, a renewed strength flooding their veins as they joined the humans in pushing the Arisian forces back. But even as victory seemed within reach, whispers spread among the coalition ranks. They spoke of the humans in odd, fearful tones, their ruthlessness unsettling to those unaccustomed to such sheer, unyielding resolve. In the humans, they saw a power that inspired but also frightened, a force that would either save them or show them the price of survival. The hum of the engines grew louder as the human craft approached, its shadow casting a looming darkness over the war-torn landscape. Soldiers across the coalition ranks paused, their attention drawn to the heavy, unmarked vessel descending with a precision that suggested both confidence and a complete disregard for anything in its way. Alien officers and soldiers alike watched with a mix of curiosity and trepidation. They had expected reinforcements, but nothing quite like this. As the craft settled onto the ground, it exuded an aura that was both imposing and unnatural. It bore no insignias, no colors or symbols of allegiance, just the dark, armored shell of a vehicle that seemed built to withstand anything. Even before the hatch opened, an unsettling chill passed through the coalition soldiers, and murmurs rippled through the ranks. The hatch opened, releasing a hiss of pressurized air, and then they appeared. Human soldiers, stepping out with the calm and calculated precision of seasoned warriors. They were smaller on average than most of the aliens present, but every movement exuded a deliberate strength. Their armor was sleek and formidable, each piece etched with scars of previous battles, a testament to the conflicts they had survived. The coalition soldiers' reactions were varied. Some of the towering, heavily built aliens raised their brows or clicked in surprise, looking at the humans' comparatively compact frames. Others muttered among themselves, skeptical that these soft-skinned beings could match the brutal force needed to hold the line. But beneath the initial skepticism was an unspoken tension. Something about the humans seemed different, even dangerous. At the forefront was the human commander, his eyes scanning the battlefield with a calculating intensity. He wore no ornamentation, his face obscured beneath a visor that seemed to pierce through the smoke and chaos. As he observed the battlefield, his posture remained relaxed, as if the destruction surrounding them was of no concern, merely an obstacle to overcome. Without a word to the alien commander, he raised a gloved hand and gestured to his squad. Each member moved with practiced synchronicity, taking positions that the coalition soldiers hadn't even considered. The coalition officers shifted, watching as the humans began their setup. The human commander moved swiftly, assessing the defenses, noting where the coalition had faltered and where opportunities lay. In a low, commanding voice, he started directing his team, his tone devoid of any hesitation. He didn't ask for input, didn't seek approval. He simply acted, expecting his commands to be followed without question. Among the alien ranks, doubt began to creep in. A few officers whispered amongst themselves, their expressions tense. Do they really think they can just come in and... One alien began, his eyes narrowing as he observed the humans' unconventional approach. But as he spoke, the humans set to work with a brisk efficiency that demanded attention. The human soldiers moved methodically, securing points of entry, establishing strongholds, and deploying equipment the aliens had never seen before. The coalition's formations had been tight and rigid, following well-rehearsed patterns, but the humans approached the battlefield with a different strategy. Instead of defending in straight lines or relying solely on brute strength, they focused on agility and unpredictability. They set up traps, anticipating enemy routes with uncanny precision, creating paths for ambushes and choke points the coalition soldiers hadn't considered. The human commander pulled out a device, mapping the terrain with rapid gestures. With a quiet confidence, he began detailing a plan that deviated from the standard defensive strategies the coalition was accustomed to. He marked weak points in the coalition's setup, arranging his soldiers in ways that seemed nonsensical at first glance. Some alien officers exchanged glances, uncertain of what to make of this foreign approach. As the humans continued, the coalition soldiers witnessed something remarkable. Within moments, the human soldiers had redefined the battlefield. Alien officers accustomed to grand, sweeping strategies watched in growing amazement as the humans employed tactics that seemed small and unorthodox, yet profoundly effective. Mines were laid in seemingly random patterns, disguising traps within what looked like empty terrain. Sharp, strategic ambushes were prepared at unexpected choke points, and their equipment, designed for rapid deployment, allowed them to set up complex, defensive networks in record time. The human commander didn't waste time explaining his methods, nor did he seek validation from the coalition officers. His focus was absolute, his directions concise. A Farnax officer, bristling with quills, approached him, a trace of doubt in his gaze. "Human, are you certain these placements will hold? They're unorthodox, even chaotic." The human commander barely paused, his tone steady. "Trust me, the chaos is the point. They'll break before we do." Some officers remained skeptical, but others, watching the humans with mounting respect, felt a quiet thrill as they observed these soldiers at work. The doubts and fears began to shift, replaced by a cautious admiration. The humans didn't rely on brute force alone. Their strength lay in an unpredictable adaptability, in strategies that blended boldness with ruthlessness. Every movement was calculated to inflict maximum damage, with minimal resources. They fought with an intensity that was different from anything the coalition had known, cold, unyielding, and relentless. As the preparations neared completion, the coalition soldiers began to take up their positions alongside the humans, following the new plan with a mixture of unease and anticipation. Those closest to the humans could feel a strange energy emanating from them, a lethal calmness that seemed at odds with the chaos of war. It was as if they thrived in these conditions, drawing strength from the uncertainty that rattled others. Within moments, the Arisian forces emerged on the horizon, surging forward in a tightly packed wave, their advance relentless. The coalition soldiers tensed, bracing themselves as the human commander raised a hand, signaling his troops. With a practiced silence, the humans readied their weapons, their faces set and unreadable behind their visors. Then, with brutal efficiency, the humans struck. Explosions erupted along the enemy's flanks, triggered by traps the Arisian forces had walked into unwittingly. The ambush points, perfectly placed, caught the Arisian soldiers in a crossfire that cut through their ranks with devastating precision. The coalition soldiers, now falling in line with the human strategies, unleashed their own weapons in tandem, their efforts amplified by the calculated chaos the humans had sown. The Arisian forces, unaccustomed to such an erratic and unforgiving assault, faltered. The humans didn't relent. They pushed forward with an intensity that seemed almost mechanical, each step measured, each shot deliberate. The coalition officers, once skeptical, now watched in stunned silence. The humans moved through the battlefield with the same calm precision they had displayed on landing, showing no signs of fear or hesitation. The battle stretched on, the coalition soldiers finding themselves emboldened by the humans' confidence. They followed the humans' lead, moving with a newfound sense of purpose as they mirrored their tactics. What had once seemed like chaos became a devastating strategy, one that turned the tide in ways they hadn't anticipated. As the Arisian forces began to pull back, the coalition soldiers let out a collective sigh of relief, the tension finally breaking. They cast glances at the humans, who were already reloading and preparing for the next wave without a word of celebration or rest. For the coalition soldiers, this victory was a moment to breathe But for the humans, it was simply a pause, a brief interval before the next encounter. The Farnax officer who had initially doubted the human commander now approached him, his quills lowered in a gesture of reluctant respect. Your strategies, they're different from anything we've known. Unpredictable, almost reckless. The human commander removed his visor, his expression as unreadable as ever. In war, the predictable die first, he replied, his voice as cold and calculating as his tactics. We don't fight to survive. We fight to end it. As he spoke, a chilling realization dawned on the coalition soldiers. These humans, with their ruthless efficiency and relentless drive, were unlike any ally they'd ever known. For the humans, war wasn't just a battle, it was a methodical endgame. And while the coalition had been fighting to hold the line, these humans were here to win, no matter the cost. The sound of gunfire and explosions echoed as the human soldiers advanced, moving with a relentless precision that pushed the enemy back. What had begun as a desperate defense turned into an aggressive offensive, with the humans leading the charge. Their attacks were sharp and unyielding, each strike calculated to maximize damage with minimal waste. They knew the battlefield as if they'd memorized every inch of it, maneuvering in ways that caught the enemy off guard, pressing forward without hesitation. Coalition soldiers watched in awe as the humans tore through enemy lines with a terrifying efficiency. They were smaller in number, but every move they made was precise, brutal, and designed to disrupt. While the coalition forces had often relied on their physical size and advanced weaponry to intimidate opponents, the humans brought something different to the fight, a fierce, cold strategy that seemed to bend the flow of battle in their favor. The alien soldiers exchanged glances, muttering amongst themselves as they watched the humans work. They were witnessing tactics that felt entirely foreign, something closer to art than warfare. The humans moved quickly, setting up ambushes, feigning retreats, and creating choke points with ease. They seemed to anticipate the enemy's every move, always one step ahead, always waiting with another trap. The coalition forces had thought they understood the human reputation for ruthlessness, but now they were seeing it in action, and it was both unsettling and awe-inspiring. Some of the coalition soldiers found themselves drawn to the humans' methods. "Do you see that?" whispered one soldier, his eyes wide with a mixture of admiration and fear. "They don't even flinch." Another alien nodded, his gaze fixed on the humans pushing forward. "It's like they were born for this," he muttered, half in awe. Yet, not all reactions were positive. A few officers, those who had prided themselves on honorable combat, looked on with unease. The humans' willingness to employ psychological tactics, misdirection, and outright deception clashed with their sense of honor. They watched as the human commander ordered a false retreat, drawing the enemy into a vulnerable position before ambushing them. It was effective, brutally so, but to some it seemed dishonorable. Still, their discomfort was overshadowed by admiration from others. There was no denying the humans' effectiveness. They fought without hesitation, without holding back, and that relentlessness sparked something within the coalition forces, a renewed sense of hope, a belief that perhaps they could actually win. For so long, the coalition had been on the defensive, struggling to hold the line, but now they felt as if they were part of something greater. Each victory, each hard-fought inch of reclaimed ground, seemed to breathe new life into them. The human commander's orders cut through the noise, each directive clear and unwavering. He guided his soldiers like pieces on a chessboard, exploiting every weakness, every blind spot the enemy presented. His voice was calm, precise, never faltering. "Flank the left side," he instructed one squad, his tone steady. "Engage at short range, keep them off balance." To another he ordered, "Fall back, draw them out. Make them think they have the advantage." The coalition soldiers tried to follow his lead, mimicking the humans' movements and tactics where they could. The human approach was like nothing they'd been trained for. Instead of holding steady positions or relying on overwhelming firepower, the humans adapted to every shift in the battle, moving fluidly and unpredictably. And slowly, the coalition forces began to understand the brilliance behind it. The enemy forces were thrown off balance, their strategies unraveled by the humans' unorthodox tactics. The humans used misinformation to confuse their foes, spreading rumors through intercepted communications, creating false trails, and planting devices to mislead the enemy about their numbers and positions. The enemy became increasingly disoriented, their once coordinated attacks now fragmented as they struggled to adapt to the shifting tides of battle. The coalition soldiers found themselves cheering as they witnessed the human success. Whenever an enemy line broke, they let out victorious cries, rallying around their newfound allies with renewed vigor. The fear that had gripped them only hours before now began to fade, replaced by a cautious optimism. The humans had shown them a new way to fight, a way to survive against overwhelming odds. Their courage, their unyielding will, it spread through the ranks like a fire. As one alien soldier lifted his weapon, he let out a triumphant yell, a war cry echoed by his comrades. "For the coalition," he shouted, and others took up the call, their voices growing louder, bolder. In those moments, the humans' presence gave them the strength to believe that victory was possible. The coalition soldiers, inspired by their ruthless allies, charged forward, joining the humans in their fierce onslaught. But amid the rising hope and cheers, there was a shift in the air. The human commander's gaze remained fixed on the horizon, his face unreadable beneath his visor. As the coalition celebrated each small victory, he seemed preoccupied, his mind calculating, evaluating. He had fought too many battles, seen too many false dawns, to let his guard down now. Then, through the thickening smoke and dust, a faint but ominous shape appeared on the horizon. At first it was barely noticeable, just a dark smudge against the sky, but it grew larger, more defined, with every passing second. A hush fell over the battlefield as the shape resolved into something unmistakable. A massive enemy reinforcement, their ranks stretching across the horizon in an endless wave. The alien soldiers froze, their cheers silenced as they stared at the approaching force. Their renewed hope wavered, replaced by a gnawing fear. They had barely managed to hold their ground, even with the humans at their side, and now the enemy had brought reinforcements, more than any of them could have anticipated. The scope of it was staggering. An army so vast it seemed to blot out the horizon. The human commander's voice cut through the silence, calm and steady as ever. "Hold your ground," he ordered, his tone unflinching. His eyes never left the advancing enemy, and there was something in his stance, a defiance that radiated through the ranks. He didn't waver, didn't show a trace of fear. His only response to the overwhelming enemy force was a cold, calculating intensity. The coalition soldiers looked to him, seeking reassurance, searching for something to hold onto. They saw the same ruthless determination that had carried them this far, and a quiet resolve began to take root. If the humans could face this army without fear, then perhaps they could too. The enemy continued to approach, their numbers seeming endless, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. The coalition soldiers felt the weight of the moment settling over them, the looming sense of an impossible battle. But as they glanced at the human soldiers, their fear began to shift. The humans weren't afraid, they were prepared. And slowly, that resolve spread, a spark reignited in each of them. The human commander raised his weapon, his gaze unyielding. "We don't back down," he said, his voice carrying over the field, steady and firm. "They wanted a war. We'll give them one." The coalition soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons, their nerves steeled. Together, humans and aliens alike prepared to face the oncoming onslaught, united by a shared determination. The enemy was close now, their shapes clear against the horizon. But as the human commander's words lingered in their minds, the coalition soldiers knew that, for the first time, they had a fighting chance. And as they braced for the final clash, the coalition realized they were no longer fighting alone. The humans surged forward, pressing the attack with relentless energy. There was no hesitation, no break in their pace. They advanced through enemy lines as if driven by an unbreakable force. Wounded soldiers continued fighting, while the rest forged ahead without a second thought. The casualties were mounting, but to the humans, each loss seemed like another step toward victory rather than a reason to hold back. For them, the risk was part of the price, a cost they were more than willing to pay. The coalition soldiers followed, but the further they went, the more they struggled to keep up. They watched as the humans fought with an intensity that felt foreign, even unsettling. The humans didn't shy away from brutal close-range combat, engaging the enemy face-to-face with a ferocity that left many of the alien soldiers both in awe and discomfort. The humans seemed to have no limit to how far they would go to secure the field, often choosing methods that others in the coalition would consider extreme or even unnecessary. Behind the main line, a group of coalition commanders gathered, murmuring among themselves as they observed the human approach. One alien commander, his voice uncertain, remarked, "They don't hold back. It's as if they're willing to do anything." Another nodded grimly, her eyes on the battlefield. "Do they feel nothing for their own?" she asked, the question hanging heavily in the air. The humans were fierce, but that fierceness came at a cost, one that didn't sit easily with everyone. There was an uncomfortable silence before another commander, a grizzled veteran, finally spoke. "Perhaps it's not that they feel nothing," he murmured, his tone contemplative, "but rather that they believe their sacrifices mean something greater. They fight for victory, and they're willing to pay any price for it." His words struck a chord among the others, but not all were convinced. Some argued in hushed tones about whether such ruthlessness was truly necessary, or if it was simply the human's way, efficient, yes, but cold, unfeeling. On the battlefield, the human commander's voice cut through the chaos, issuing a new set of orders. His tone remained calm, steady, as he directed his soldiers with an unflinching pragmatism. The coalition soldiers watched as his commands orchestrated a series of coordinated ambushes, each one driving the enemy back, each one a calculated move that seemed to ignore the risks to those carrying it out. To the humans, the end justified the means, but for many in the coalition, the cost seemed almost too great. As the humans continued their advance, the tension among the coalition forces grew. For some, the human approach represented a brutal efficiency that inspired them to push harder, to do more than they'd thought possible. But for others, there was a lingering unease, a sense that they were witnessing something that walked the line between necessity and ruthlessness. The humans' tactics were effective, but they came with a weight that was beginning to settle heavily on those watching. Then, as they pushed deeper into enemy territory, the human commander's gaze narrowed. His sharp instincts, honed through years of warfare, had detected something wrong. He gave a quick, firm order to halt, and his soldiers responded instantly, freezing in place, weapons raised, eyes scanning the area. The coalition forces looked on in confusion, unsure of what he'd sensed, but trusting his judgment. The human commander's suspicion proved correct. The enemy had laid a trap, a clever ambush, meant to lure them into a kill zone. For a brief moment, the coalition commanders shared a look of grim resignation. They'd all seen traps like this before, and they knew how devastating they could be. But the human commander didn't hesitate. He quickly issued a new set of orders, instructing his soldiers to split into smaller units, move into specific positions, and counter the ambush with a daring maneuver. The move was high risk, designed to turn the trap against the enemy. The coalition soldiers hesitated, uncertain about taking such a dangerous course of action. But the humans had no such reservations. They executed the plan with swift precision, even as they took casualties along the way. The coalition forces, inspired by their allies' unflinching resolve, pushed forward, steeling themselves against the enemy's assault. The maneuver worked, but at a price. Coalition soldiers fell alongside the humans, casualties that weighed heavily on those who had watched the plan unfold. The human commander's strategy had turned the tide of the battle, but it had also highlighted the cost of such an approach. The humans pressed on, undeterred, but among the coalition soldiers, there was a growing awareness of just how far these humans were willing to go. The battlefield was littered with the remnants of their struggle, each fallen soldier a stark reminder of the toll. The human commander surveyed the field with a measured gaze, his expression giving nothing away. He called for a brief halt to regroup, allowing his forces to take stock of their injuries and losses. There was no time for grief, no moment spared for hesitation. His voice remained calm as he issued new orders, directing his soldiers to prepare for the next stage of their assault. For him, each casualty was simply part of the grim arithmetic of war. The coalition soldiers watched with a mix of admiration and uncertainty. They respected the humans' resolve, their willingness to keep fighting despite the odds. But they couldn't shake the feeling that they were witnessing a side of warfare they hadn't truly understood before. War, to the humans, was more than just a battle. It was a cold calculation, a test of endurance, and a willingness to sacrifice whatever was necessary to achieve victory. As they regrouped, a coalition officer approached the human commander, his expression tense. "Your tactics, they're effective," he said, choosing his words carefully. "But at what cost? These are lives, soldiers, not just numbers on a board." The human commander met his gaze, his eyes steely. "Every soldier here knew the risks," he replied, his tone firm but not unkind. "They fight because they believe in the cause, and they're willing to make sacrifices to see it through." The coalition officer nodded slowly, absorbing the words. It was a perspective that was both hard to accept and difficult to argue against. In that moment, he realized that the humans' approach to war was shaped not by a lack of feeling, but by a hard-won understanding of what victory required. For the humans, survival wasn't just about preserving life. It was about ensuring that their sacrifice had meaning, that every step forward brought them closer to securing a future for those who remained. As the battle continued, the coalition soldiers found themselves following the humans with a new sense of purpose. They didn't fully understand the humans' relentless nature, but they could see the results. The enemy was falling back, their forces dwindling under the onslaught. For the first time, true victory felt within reach, even if the cost weighed heavily on their shoulders. The final push began, the humans leading the charge with a fierce determination that seemed almost otherworldly. The coalition soldiers joined them, their voices rising in a united battle cry. The enemy forces, once so confident, now found themselves facing an alliance that refused to break, one that had been tempered by the humans' unyielding will. But as the battle drew to a close, the toll of the conflict was undeniable. The ground was scarred, the fallen scattered across the field, a stark testament to the cost of victory. The coalition soldiers looked upon the human commander, seeing him now with a mixture of respect and wariness. They had won, yes, but they understood that this victory had come with a price, one that they would carry with them long after the battle was over. As the dust settled, the humans and coalition soldiers gathered, their faces etched with exhaustion and grim satisfaction. The battle was theirs, but the cost lingered, a reminder of the ruthless resolve that had carried them through. And as they prepared to face whatever lay ahead, they knew that this victory marked not an end, but a beginning, a hint that the coming conflict would demand even more, that the road ahead was one they would have to walk together, for better or worse. The humans gathered, setting their sights on the enemy's command center. The plan was risky, bordering on reckless, but they all knew it was the only way to bring the battle to a swift and decisive end. Their commander outlined the plan, his voice low but unyielding. They would strike directly at the heart, taking down the enemy leadership in one bold, coordinated assault. It was a high-stakes move, one that would require every ounce of their skill and determination. Without hesitation, the humans launched the attack, cutting through enemy lines with a brutal efficiency that left the coalition forces trailing behind in awe. Coalition soldiers pushed forward alongside the humans, following their lead as the battle intensified around them. The closer they got to the enemy's stronghold, the fiercer the resistance became. It was clear that the enemy would not yield easily. Barricades, traps, and waves of reinforcements waited, but the humans pressed on, their faces grimly set. Inside the command center, the enemy fought with desperation, pouring everything they had into defending their position. The humans met their resistance with unwavering determination, pushing through despite the relentless fire and close-quarters combat. The battle turned brutal, chaotic, with each side fighting for every inch of ground. Coalition soldiers found themselves witnessing the full extent of humanity's resolve as they watched the humans refuse to fall back, even in the face of overwhelming odds. With the humans at the lead, coalition forces gained ground, inch by hard-fought inch. The human commander directed his troops with precision, taking advantage of every opening, exploiting every enemy weakness. Each move was calculated, each order designed to press their advantage. The coalition soldiers, inspired and driven by the humans' intensity, found themselves fighting harder than they ever had before. The realization began to sink in. This battle could only be won because of humanity's relentless, uncompromising approach. After hours of grueling combat, the coalition forces finally broke through, breaching the command center walls. Inside, the enemy's command structure lay exposed, its leaders scrambling to mount a defense as the humans closed in. The battle reached a fever pitch, the clash echoing through the corridors of the stronghold. The coalition soldiers could only watch as the humans stormed forward with a level of focus that was both admirable and unnerving. The enemy command was crushed, their last line of defense shattered under the unyielding force of the human assault. As the dust settled, the battlefield grew silent. The coalition forces gathered, looking around at the remnants of the enemy's once formidable defenses. They had won. Victory was theirs. And as they looked at the human soldiers, bloodied, bruised, but standing tall, a new respect took root. This was no ordinary ally. Humanity's willingness to go further, to push harder, had been the key to their success. The coalition commanders, many of whom had doubted the humans' methods, now found themselves grappling with a newfound understanding of what it took to win such a battle. In the aftermath, the alien commanders gathered, exchanging somber glances as they processed the reality of what they had just witnessed. Some remained silent, their expressions conflicted, torn between admiration and discomfort. One commander finally spoke, his voice hushed yet resolute. "We would not have succeeded without them," he admitted. "Their methods are harsh, perhaps even extreme," but he trailed off, searching for the right words. "It is that willingness to do what we cannot that won this day." Another commander nodded, her gaze fixed on the human soldiers as they regrouped. "They see things differently," she mused. "To them, victory is not about glory or honor, it's about survival, about ensuring that their people can live another day, even if it means making sacrifices we would hesitate to make." As the conversation continued, a sense of reverence settled over the group. They had come face to face with a mindset unlike any they had known. The humans were more than just soldiers. They were survivors, forged by a history of hardship and relentless determination. And while some of the coalition leaders still wrestled with the ethical implications, there was no denying the effectiveness of the humans' approach. Their willingness to do what others would not had given them a unique strength, a resilience that bordered on the unnerving. In the distance, the human commander stood alone, surveying the battlefield with a stoic expression. One of the alien commanders approached him, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "Your methods, they're effective," he acknowledged, "but they're also ruthless." The human commander turned to him, his gaze unwavering. "War isn't about being ruthless," he replied quietly. "It's about being willing to do what's necessary, to make hard choices, because that's the only way to survive. The alien commander nodded slowly, the weight of the words settling over him. There was a brutal honesty in the human's answer, a glimpse into a mindset shaped by the harsh realities of their world. It was clear now that humanity's strength didn't lie in their technology or their weapons. It lay in their spirit, in the relentless drive that pushed them forward, even in the darkest moments. As the coalition forces regrouped, preparing for the journey home, the alien commanders cast one last look at the human soldiers, a mixture of awe and caution in their eyes. They had seen the best and worst of humanity, the resilience and the ruthlessness that came hand in hand. And while some part of them feared this new ally, they couldn't deny the respect that had been earned on this battlefield.